This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman
and Brad Kelly. We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of what drives creative people to create against all odds.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
Each episode, we excavate the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
On every episode, we try and find out just what the hell was wrong with them and how they worked through their darkness to create something that lives on after them and continues to move culture.
Find us online at artofdarkpod.com and on Twitter at artofdarkpod. All right, we've got some sponsors for the pod now.
Wait, what?
Every link you need for the things we talk about here is at artofdarkpod.com/sponsors. First up, books.
If you're into this podcast, odds are you're probably a reader. We've got links to buy new books from bookshop.org and used books from alibris.com.
And if you want to listen to your books, we recommend and use audible.com.
It's great, and the catalog is huge.
All right. So if you're listening to this, you are online.
Maybe you're very online.
You probably have a website or are thinking of starting one. Maybe you want a website like artofdarkpod.com. We built that with WordPress, which is by far the most popular way to create websites. And the single best host for serious WordPress is WP Engine. I've personally used them for over a decade now, and I don't host my websites anywhere else. Go to artofdarkpod.com/sponsors and click on the WP Engine link to learn more.
Finally, the best way to support the show is at patreon.com/artofdarkpod. Get the bonus After Dark content for every episode, access to the book club, and more.
Thanks for supporting Art of Darkness. And I don't think that was too painful. I think we did a pretty good job there.
Yeah, that sounded good.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
In the dark room, artofdarkpod.com. Patreon.com/artofdarkpod, t.me/artofdarkpod. Tonight, I almost said today, but it's like, this is a late one for us. So
people are listening to it. GMs in the chat.
Yeah. GM, GA, and GN.
That's it. There you go. Yeah.
We are talking more David Foster Wallace with the great Astral. Astral, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate you. Your generosity with your time. Very much looking forward to talking with you.
Well, thank you guys for your generosity for having me on again. I look forward to this being a rapport our podcasts have all the way as long as we have podcasts.
Yeah, for sure, man. And so for folks who maybe are just coming to this new or coming to Art of Darkness new, this is a dark room episode. What this means is we have friends, interesting people from all sorts of corners of the internet come on, and we do sort of a follow-up, somewhat looser conversation about a subject that we have covered in depth already. So there is Kevin, how long is the David Foster Wallace episode? 4 hours and 20 minutes or something like that?
4 hours, 20-ish.
Something like that. So we did the whole, we tell the whole David Foster Wallace story, his biography. We talk about the book, the work that he did from the novels to the nonfiction. Talk about, we pretty much tell the whole story. But of course, with a guy like David Foster Wallace, there is a lot more to say. A lot of people have opinions, including the three of us. Hopefully, we've got some common ground here, at least. I think that we do. Kevin, where are you at with, I'm just kind of throw it to you first, just because I know you hadn't read a ton of David Foster Wallace before we did that episode. After that episode, kind of where do you stand with him?
Yeah, he's still a bit of a cipher for me. I think, didn't we determine that he's technically a boomer?
Yeah, he's a late boomer generation.
Isn't that crazy?
It is. It's crazy.
That's crazy to think about that he's a boomer.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, those things are kind of, funny anyway, right? Like I'm technically a millennial, but I've got Gen X characteristics. There's cuspers are a thing. And then of course, there's somebody like DFW who was inventing the future. He's going to feel more current than somebody who, sold real estate.
Yeah, for sure.
Or whatever. That's not that there's anything wrong with selling real estate, boys. Am I right?
Right.
You gotta pay the bills. I find him fascinating, but I haven't really. I'm not going to lie and say we did the episode and then I ran out and read as much DFW as I could get my hands on. I came away, however, appreciating the tragedy of his suicide. You were very affected by it, Brad.
Yeah,
definitely. Those episodes are often very difficult, but he was so young, and this is a cliche, but it would be fascinating to hear what he would be writing now, particularly the cultural essays. Can you imagine what a David Foster Wallace essay would look like?
Yeah, and as opposed to a lot of our subjects, like he would be alive still in a normal life expectancy, right?
He'd be let's see, he'd be like 60.
Yeah, I think he'd be in his early 60s or I think he's born in 1964. I might have that wrong, but he would be he'd be in his 60s, which for a novelist
he'd be 63-ish, 62, 63.
Okay, even older than I thought.
We could get a DFW essay about going to get the senior discount at Denny's, something like that.
It sounds like something he would write.
It would be all about those young whippersnappers. That would be all of his essays. About how the Zoomers don't make any sense. Well, okay. So let me. There's something I wanted to talk about, and of course we're going to go wherever we end up going here, but I've got a few things kind of teed up. One is I want to pose this question. I'm curious Astral's opinion. Astral, you recently had that great conversation with Dan Baltic and Last Things, David Foster Wallace, base versus cringe. It wasn't really a debate with one side or the other, but it was a very interesting conversation. I do recommend people going to check that out. I feel like between our core episode, what we're going to talk about today, and that, there's some very good, useful, interesting David Foster Wallace content out there. The question I want to ask is Infinite Jest a great American novel, and is it the last great American novel?
This is a difficult question to answer with what I don't think is a straightforward answer, because the case for it to being a failed great American novel is very strong. And as a fan of David Foster Wallace, as a fan of this book, I have to say that when people complain about this novel and David Foster Wallace bellyaches about how it was edited and some of the important stuff was taken out and people just don't understand it, it does seem futile. It seems like a futile sort of, the argument is, if you've read the book, it's like the argument is lost before it's even started.
You telling me that door stopper was edited? Heavily edited? Is that what you're telling me?
Did you not know that? They took out like...
I may have heard it.
They took out like 300 pages, and David Foster Wallace insists that those were 300 essential pages that the book could not afford to lose, but he had no choice. And there's an interview with the editor who made those decisions on Michael the internet. Peach. I can't think of, is that who it is?
I think, well, that was his editor, but it may have passed through other hands as well, so might not.
Well, whoever the guy is that made the decisions has an interview online that you can find, and I would have looked it up before the show if I thought we'd bring it up, because I can't think. It's easy to find, though. It's easy to find on iTunes, and he says that every single cut he tried to make, David Foster Wallace insisted that making that cut would ruin the novel and make it incoherent to the reader. And he didn't care. The editor didn't care. But he said that Wallace convinced him to keep a couple things in. And it's been years since I listened to this interview. But if I know for a fact, excuse me, I know for a fact that there was something that they had a knockdown, drag out fight about, and David Foster Wallace would simply not budge. So he left it in. And it turned out to be one of the most popular, well-received passages by all readers. And he got compliments on it endlessly. I think it was the eschaton scene.
Okay.
But don't quote me on that. Which is funny because I put the novel down and took a break from it. and picked it back up and finished. Oh, no. It wasn't the eschaton scene. Do you remember the scene where he's going through the president? I think is he the president of Mexico or Canada who becomes like the overlord, the tyrant of whatever.
I think it's the president of Mexico, but
I think it's the president of
that.
Mexico.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where they talk about some plan for nuclear strike that they have. It's leading up to or right after the eschaton scene.
Mm-hmm.
And they're writing the whole thing out on the back of napkins. And it just goes on for 10 pages of these notes that they put on the back of napkins.
Right.
And it's like, you know, David, this is what this novel is. This is what David Foster Wallace does.
Mm-hmm.
The offhand phrase that something, you know, you scribble it down on the back of a napkin is a joke that he just drags out for so many pages. And that's what the whole novel is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like jokes that he just drags out for way more pages than it should be dragged out for. And I just had enough at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's somewhere in the novel near the eschaton scene. And I put it down for maybe 4 months, maybe, or more, even 6 months, and then picked it back up. I think the book itself took me about 3 months of reading, but I took multiple breaks. And that 3 months was stretched out over maybe a year, 9 months to a year. I put it down for a long stretch, but I did take other long breaks to read other novels.
Yeah.
So I would read 300 pages and then read another whole novel and then go back. And the novels I was reading were like Celine.
Right.
And like they weren't like throwaway novellas. It
Right. Yeah, exactly. Let me pick up some other dense.
I really got to go back and reread the Da Vinci Code. I think it's really going to land.
The joke was like, I need some light reading after this. I'm going to read Journey to the End of the Night.
Yeah.
And I remember I read Naked Lunch, Bukowski's Women, Celine's Journey to the End of the Night, and something else that'll come to me, all while I was on breaks from Infinite Jest.
Damn, have the normal one, man.
That's right, exactly right.
No, that sounds like
I read not to derail the conversation as soon as it starts. I read The Savage Detectives on a break in the middle of the Brothers Karamazov.
Oh, is that man?
Like that's who you're dealing with right now.
Right. Well, see, the Brothers Karamazov is another one. Like, you kind of do need a break. I mean, with modern computer brain, like it's, you know, I don't remember. I first read Infinite Jest long enough ago that I can't tell you a lot of details about what it was like to read it. But I do remember that, like, I feel like I had to travel a bunch with it, like separate trips that were kind of spread out, like a spring trip and then a summer trip. I had to take this thing. Yeah. And so it was a process for me too, for sure. And Karamazov was similar, to be honest. I was definitely.
I found the chapter.
Okay, great.
Immediately, I found the chapter that broke me. Let me see where I can find the beginning of the chapter here, and it's the president of Mexico. Well, it's page 407.
Okay.
It's chapter 8, 8th of November, year of the depend adult undergarment, Gaudimus Igitur. I don't even know how to pronounce that. I don't even know what any of that means, but that's the chapter.
Okay.
And I think it's either right before or right after Eschaton. I think it's right after Eschaton. And I read the Eschaton chapter, and then I got into this, and I just was like, you know, I've thrown 2 books across the room.
Yeah.
This was one of them. You want to know what the other one was?
What's that?
The Illuminatus trilogy, which I read in 1 volume. So it was 2 massive door stoppers.
You do some damage with that, man.
Yeah. I remember throwing Illuminatus trilogy across the room twice, and then just sitting there like pouting with my shoulders and my arms crossed and like harumphing,
right?
And then just like eyeing it out of the corner of my eye, and then like being like, all right, I picked it back up.
Is that like frustration with it? Like,
well, yeah, it's different frustration. If you must have read. I bet you've read it. You have to.
I have not read Illuminatus.
Oh,
that's
that is your
my big
book,
blank
man.
spot. I know.
Kevin,
I would love it because everything I
me too. It's ridiculous. It's one of those. Yeah, for real. I don't know it. Yeah.
Oh, Kevin made a face too. Well, you guys have an episode on Crowley.
Yeah.
This guy was a big Crowley. Robert Anton Wilson's a big Crowley.
Yeah.
And I know I'm familiar with Robert Anton Wilson. I mean, he's a guy I've listened to a lot. You know, you find him on YouTube or whatever. I've listened to a lot of stuff he said. So
I forgot.
One day I will get into Illuminatus.
Yeah, I have to do it. Yeah, that comes up again and again and again.
It really
does.
Sure.
Bro,
Yeah.
I mean, dude, this guy is like shooing for Art of Darkness. I mean, there has to be a Robert Anton Wilson episode someday.
We will do one
every time I talk to you guys, I give you homework. I give you a new.
we got a list, and it's getting bigger and bigger.
Well,
and bigger.
No, not at all. You know, you said something there a minute ago, Astral, about harumphing.
Yeah,
men used to harumph.
We don't harumph anymore.
We don't harumph anymore. We need to return to harumph.
Well, you know, we're talking about David Foster Wallace, new sincerity. I feel like harumphing is a very sincere gesture. It's a very like, you know, it's a little vulnerable. It's, you know,
yeah.
I'm writing the word irony down. I listened to your episode.
Good. We're definitely gonna talk about irony.
But let's can we get back to the Great American Novel? I totally derailed that question.
That's okay.
What I wanted to say initially was that there's a strong case to be made that it's a failed Great American Novel. And I think he was facing that criticism during his own lifetime. And you brought up the possibility in the episode that it's a failed novel.
Mm-hmm.
I understand why people think that. I don't think that. I think it's a resounding success.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not within the framework of what you think of as the Great American Novel. It's not even really in the framework of what you think of as a novel. Carl Knausgaard, who wrote My Struggle, said that it was he was trying to do Tristram Shandy. I don't think he was trying to do Tristram Shandy. I only know Tristram Shandy through looking through it because Carl Knausgaard said that. This doesn't seem like that. I think he's more trying to do Joyce and Finnegan's Wake, which me and Brad were talking about before the show started. I've not read Finnegan's Wake either. Me and Brad both decided we're probably not ever going to read it.
Right.
I have owned Finnegan's Wake. I have read from it. But it's like it's totally inaccessible. It's like totally inaccessible.
It really is. I for a while there, I would open to a random page and read it. Just read that page and just sort of go, okay, that was every page of that book is like a little dose of acid. And so you just
funny you should say that, because the reason I bought Finnegan's Wake and tried to read it is because Robert Anton Wilson, who is a huge acid freak, they talk about it constantly in the Illuminatus trilogy. Constantly. I mean, they're constantly calling it the greatest novel ever written, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
And I think Wallace is quite conscientiously trying to do something like that because he thinks it's clever. He thinks James Joyce is clever. People think James Joyce is clever. And it affords you this level of like esoteric, you know, high level. He always uses this word high level. He's extremely self-conscious. It affords you this level of like high level literary clout that only certain people who are willing to do. And here's the key. This is the key. Only certain people who are willing to do extra work outside the novel and extra reading will be able to appreciate this. That is what like the modernist novel is. Like the whole thing with Ulysses is like, well, if you don't understand the Odyssey and if you don't understand all the references, the same with The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, you can't really appreciate these poems by themselves. You have to have this whole contextual thing. Right. And I think Wallace is trying to do that. I think his whole career is him trying to do that, but it's this like very debased sort of midwit version of it. Kevin made the point quite nicely in your pod that like out of at least 100 applicants to the PhD program at Harvard, 6 of them got in and one of them was Wallace. You can't do that if you're a midwit. And I don't think Wallace is a midwit. I think he has crippling anxiety, and it causes him to do these stupid midwit things.
Right.
Because and now I'm coming back around to my point, because I think that this book is a resounding success as a postmodern novel, which is exactly what he was trying to do. He was trying to write a postmodern novel. He was trying to write the postmodern novel par excellence in response to Barth, who in the essay The Literature of Exhaustion, which I talk about on Dan not Dan Baltic's, but Last Things podcast with Dan Baltic, was basically like the clarion, or not the clarion call, but the whatever the opposite of the clarion call is, the death knell of the novel. That essay purported to be the death knell of the novel. Like, the novel is done. There's nowhere for us to go. The genre, the form is exhausted. And the only things we can do now are these things that he lays out in that essay. And he proceeds then to write Welcome to the Funhouse, which is more of an experiment than an actual novel. And I think Wallace is conscientiously and purposefully and explicitly saying, fuck no, it's not over. It's not exhausted. We are in postmodernism. We have the postmodern novel, and this is what the fuck it looks like.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, it's a resounding success. The problem is that a lot of people don't like that shit.
Right.
That's the problem. A lot of people.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So that's where I'm at with this book.
Yeah, no, I quite like that. And you're quite right to bring up Barth. I mean, David Foster Wallace, in his very long short story, or his short novella, Westward, what is it? Westward, the Course of the
Empire takes its way.
Something, yeah. I mean, that was a sort of a parody of Lost in the Funhouse in a way, and was sort of a declaration of, like, you know, we're gonna keep going to an extent. And the next big fiction project of Wallace's was Infinite Jest. I mean, it took years to write such a massive book. But
3 years to be exact.
Is that how long it took?
Yeah, it took him 3 years.
That's insane. I'm writing a novel now that I've been working on it 3 years. It's 200 and some odd pages.
Well, bro, dude, in your episode, you said he wrote 25,000 words a day. I'm like, wait a second, did I hear this right? That must not, that you can't keep that
2,500.
Must have been 20. I may have misspoke.
Maybe I heard you wrong. Maybe I
he might have been. I could maybe see somebody pulling that off, though. I could.
I mean, on a day once.
Yeah, once, but not consistently. Day. Yeah, you'd go nuts. Yeah, you would lose your mind. Yeah.
It's interesting too. So the thing that you brought up, Astral, about the fact that, you know, these 300 pages are taken out by the editor, and David Foster Wallace is arguing for them, you know, them all being critical. And in a way, you know, I do want to kind of respect that statement of his, because I mean, I think a lot of people do think the book is incomprehensible. I have to say that I find it on a page by page, you know, perspective, it's very accessible. It's not hard to read. Finnegan's Wake is like, every sentence you're like, what?
The first paragraph is...
Right. Infinite Jest, you can read a few pages and you'll follow along just fine. Where it gets difficult is the overall, what is actually happening in general, because there's so much is happening. Dozens, if not hundreds of pages will go by with character, and then a character will reemerge. There's a difficulty in just generally keeping all of the threads together, that I think is there for sure. But I do wonder, David Foster Wallace claimed that he was structuring this whole thing based on a Sierpinski gasket, which is this like proto-fractal triangular pattern. And then, which would be intricate and delicate. And I could see, if you pull one triangle out of the Sierpinski triangle, the Sierpinski gasket, the whole thing could stop making sense. Maybe. I mean, there is an argument too, though. I think there's a legitimate argument of, like, is it? There's
a GIF of that I use as the symbol for my Substack, just totally by accident. I did not know that. Yeah,
you
so there
are
you go.
DFW
Weird Apparently, I am. Yeah, I looked it up.
Well, let me Google it. What is it called? The
Sierpinski gasket, or Sierpinski triangle.
Triangle. It's very beautiful.
Yeah. It is.
It's sort of a lovely fractal pattern. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it conveys, and
I've seen this before.
It's got infinite recursion in it, right? Every triangle can contain an image of itself infinitely deep, basically.
It's the only acceptable kind of recursion on the podcast. Is infinite.
It's infinite recursion.
How do you like your coffee? Infinite.
Well, there's I think it's the second book in the Illuminatus trilogy is called The Eye in the Pyramid. And I want to see if it's got a Sierpinski gasket
Oh, it
on it,
might.
because it looks very similar to it, but I think it's different.
It very well could. That's interesting. And I think, yeah, while you're checking that out, I mean, this kind of structuring of a book is an interesting project, I suppose. I don't know if it makes for the most readable or interesting text. But I do think there is something about like infinite interconnections going on in this book, which I think, I mean, it almost feels sort of cliche to say it, but I think it is also true, is that sort of like we all kind of live in an infinitely recursive network now. And you kind of wonder, like, if someone is going to write the great American novel, does it need to take place in an environment that is that complicated in order to capture something, to say something about American life?
Tell me what you mean by the environment, because I think you mean something, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
well, I mean, put a fine point on it, just like living on the internet and also living like information siloed, so that like what you choose to see is sort of repeated back to you, and then you continually go down that like rabbit, we continuously subdivide ourselves, and so we're all in like a subculture of one, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that if it's possible to write something like the great American novel, I feel like you're going to have to try and harness that somehow. Like, I don't think you can even write what would be the great American novel and have it just be a straightforward, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, the end. I don't think that would capture the American experience anymore.
I think that's why people think it's a failed novel, because it doesn't do that.
Mm.
It doesn't say this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Yeah.
Right.
And I'm not really the one to speak on Joyce and Ulysses. It's actually one of the main books I need to get to soon, because it's a huge missing piece in my pyramid structure of my literary knowledge. But I am aware, as most people are, that book is about like a day in the life of somebody in Dublin. And of course, one of the I think it was, I read, he's got The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, which I read, and and Dubliners, which is short stories, which I've also read. And I kind of was like, I didn't really think much of them.
Okay,
They're kind of like unimpressive, but maybe I have to go back and reread them. Point being, though, is he's got this like sprawling panoramic image or view or perspective into Dublin. Like, the idea is that he's creating this like odyssey of Dublin. It's not, the Aegean where Odysseus is traveling all around to go home. It's the city of Dublin. And if there's something Wallace is doing where he's trying to be Joycean, it's that panorama of Boston. He's doing like a panorama of Boston, which would make sense if you want to write the great American novel, because even though Boston isn't really a prominent city to us now, it is perhaps the most important city in American history because of the revolution and things like that.
Sure, yeah.
So it makes sense. And obviously it's personal to him, it's intimate, because he spent time there. He spent a transformative period in his life, especially a transformative period in relation to this novel for him. So in that sense, I think that's partially what he's trying to do, because you're in the tennis academy, you're in the psych ward, you're on the streets with Wardine and the homeless people, you're other places, you're in, I don't remember if Hal's father lived in Boston, but then you have his brother who I think is in Arizona, right?
Yeah.
So you're getting this like sprawling picture of America, which I think he's trying to do. And it's interesting, though, because there's a lot of mundanity mixed in with the slapstick, because it's a very slapstick book. The humor is slapstick, dark slapstick humor.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's very absurd.
Yeah,
but,
it's very Pynchonian in that way.
And then Pynchon's the other elephant in the room, great writer looming over this conversation and looming over that novel.
Yeah.
All this talk I have of Joyce and Barth, some people say, you really need I mean, I've had people basically say to me, like, no, those people aren't really that important. It's Pynchon. Pynchon's the one, you know, which may be true. I don't know. But either way, my point though, to your comments about
Mhm.
maybe you have to do this complicated mathematical pattern weaving
Yeah, something like
to
that. Yeah.
write the great American novel now. I think that's partially what he's trying to do, because it's not provincial, or it's not totally fantasy land, and it's not just like a snippet of a small microcosm. He's trying to do like the whole thing. He's got like
Right.
all levels of society. He's got like homeless people, and he's got like extremely wealthy, successful, movie producers, and guys who are going to elite tennis academies, and guys who are in, halfway houses. Who and what was Don Gately, a roofer or a carpenter or something
Something
like that?
like
No,
that.
he
Yeah.
was a thief actually.
Yeah,
He was,
he had been a
yeah,
thief, but he did like janitor work for a lot of the
right.
halfway houses and stuff like that. Yeah,
Right. So
yeah.
I think in that way, Wallace was trying to make this like all encompassing, and all this stuff you're talking about with the Sapinski triangle or whatever you call it.
Mm.
I just where I am butchering that term.
No, sir. I think it's you can either call it a Sierpinski triangle or a Sierpinski gasket, apparently.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That is. I had one last thing to say about it. That is. It's gone.
No, it's all right. So, yeah, it's interesting. Well, this makes me wonder. It's like, okay, what is, because now I start to wonder, like, all right, this term gets thrown around, and in some ways, maybe these terms don't mean that
Oh,
much.
the maximalist novel.
Yeah,
That's
go
what I
ahead.
was going to say.
Okay.
No, you go ahead. It just
Well, I was
popped back in my head.
Yeah, I was just gonna like poke holes in the idea of the great American novel anyway. Like, is
Let's
it
do
ever
it.
been a thing? Is it useful at all as a conceit, right? And if it is, can it even be done, or is something happening in America where it's not really even possible anymore? Which is actually kind of where I land on it.
Yeah, I don't think it's possible anymore. I think it was a thing.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was curious. There's a list. There's a list of great American novels, right? These are ones that people have made strong arguments for. And let me just read them to you really quick. Last of the Mohicans,
Right.
The Scarlet Letter, Moby Dick, obviously,
Right.
Uncle Tom's Cabin, Huckleberry Finn, Red Badge of Courage, McTeague, Great Gatsby, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, which I thought was interesting, Absalom, Grapes of Wrath, Catcher in the Rye, Invisible Man, Adventures of Augie March, Lolita, written by a Russian, which is interesting. To Kill a Mockingbird, Gravity's Rainbow, Blood Meridian, Beloved, American Psycho, Infinite Jest, Underworld, Franzen's Freedom, and then Michael Chabon's Telegraph Avenue, which I don't know anything about.
Random.
So
yeah, and I never even heard of two of those. I've read more of those novels than I was expecting to have read.
I've read most of them.
Yeah, I've read most of them. Now, Absalom's an interesting one, because I thought that one was. I mean, I don't know if I'm gonna destroy any bona fides I may have had with your listeners, but I found that novel completely incoherent. I had no fucking idea what I was reading, and I didn't finish it, sadly. I think I read 250 pages of it, and I don't remember. It's a book, 500 pages long.
It's a book that I read, and I probably followed or understood 2/3 of it.
Yeah,
There's definitely a lot where
you should put not you, but they should put As I Lay Dying on that list, not Absalom. I don't know why you would put Absalom on that list, unless you're trying to be clever.
Right.
But you could. I think that I was saying that I don't think I was talking to you guys about this, but I was saying that there's like at least two major currents of American writing, and they kind of break off into smaller streams as it's like a delta, but it's fed by American literature is fed by two major rivers, and one of them is like Fenimore Cooper, Hemingway, Stephen Crane, others. And the other one is Melville, Faulkner, David Foster Wallace, Pynchon, and
McCarthy, maybe.
Yeah, well, McCarthy's a little bit more coherent than these guys. He doesn't he doesn't have the long tangentiality that characterizes Moby Dick, Absalom, and Infinite Jest among the other things I named.
True.
He's kind of in between.
Mhm.
But the point is, what was my point?
We've got
The
these two
point is
streams.
that no, the point is that I think David Foster Wallace is firmly in the stream with Faulkner. Faulkner maybe even, well, no, I would have to say Moby Dick is the inception point. And one of the things that you characterized this by, I did a thread on this on Twitter. If I knew I'd bring it up, I'd have pulled it up.
Yeah.
But one of the things that characterizes this stream is encyclopedic knowledge of your subject. So I've been taught that Moby Dick is expressly modeled. Actually, this was where I came up with this whole perspective from, was this insight right here, which is not my own. I got this from other people. That Moby Dick, that the American Encyclopedia, which was a Protestant project in America apparently, and I don't know which one the American one is called, but I know the British one is obviously the
Encyclopedia
Britannica, yeah. So they were trying to make an American one, and Melville was reading it, and he was like, a big fan of it or whatever, an advocate for it. So he was trying to create like an encyclopedic novel about whales.
It's the whale entry. It's the whale entry in the American Encyclopedia.
His mythological whale entry in the encyclopedia. Right. While for Faulkner, I would say it's the South. There's more to it than that. But the point is that Hemingway was apparently responding to the newspaper, which was obviously like in its heyday, and he was a journalist.
Right.
And
he brought if I may, Astral, Hemingway very famously brought the journalistic style of writing into literature. Yeah.
And that is what created, in my opinion, the two streams, the two rivers of American literature. And Wallace, I think it's impossible to refute, is firmly in the Melville Faulkner camp. Pynchon as well. I mean, Gravity's Rainbow is like an encyclopedic novel.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And this is the maximalist novel as well. Like, this is the argument of what the maximalist novel is. Now, I have a whole theory I won't subject you guys to right now about why the maximalist novel even exists. But the point is it's very firmly in this other tradition. And to repeat myself, but it's very important though, is tangentiality is a huge characterizing feature of this type of writing, which is not in Salinger. It's not in Hemingway. It's not in Raymond Carver. I don't think it's in Franzen.
It's not in Fitzgerald. It's not in a couple of these other people on this list of great American novelists. I mean, I don't think Nabokov really is a maximalist. I think he probably could have done that if he wanted to, because I think he was such a virtuoso, but it's not really what he did.
He definitely could have done it, because wasn't he an arborist or a botanist or an insect,
a butterfly collector?
Right.
Yeah, very interesting.
I found a couple of hang on, Brad. I found a couple of interesting factoids on the Infinite Jest Wikipedia adaptations. This is very short. Playwright Ken Campbell, is like an British English playwright, worked on an adaptation of Infinite Jest for the Millennium. His concept was to have 1,000 performers who each paid $23 to take part in the event, which would last a week. It never came to fruition.
I wonder why.
Okay. Yeah. And then German theatrical company Hebel am Ufer produced a 24-hour avant-garde open-air theater adaptation in 2020. Woo!
24 hours.
Conceptually, I'm fucking sold on both of these ideas. I'm all for it.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting.
I like this idea of you pay to
be
partake in this piece of theater. Yeah, kind of fun.
Yeah.
Dude, one of the greatest trivia things that I did not know that I learned from your episode was that Wallace had to pay for the printing of one of his own novels.
Yeah.
Was it the girl with the curious hair?
I think it was Girl with the Curious Hair, if I'm remembering right. Yeah, he had so many last minute changes that, like, because of where it was at in the production process, it was like, dude, we can't do this. You gotta cough up some dough.
That is exactly what I was talking about, where I said I think he probably is a genius and his own crippling anxiety like holds him back. That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, just gotta have the last, gotta keep changing it, gotta keep changing it, thought about it. I mean, you can, yeah, his crippling self-consciousness is probably kind of what, ultimately killed him, to be honest. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, clearly.
in some
Right.
way,
Yeah.
depending on what angle you want to take at the thing. But it's interesting, but it's, I feel like a writer to, well, then now this makes me interested in is maximalism a symptom of anxiety?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because I felt like I was pontificating so egregiously that I was just going to stop. But you just set up the exact thing I was going to go off on.
Okay,
Like
all right. Well,
literally.
yeah, go off.
Yes, it is a symptom. I've recently been reading Marshall McLuhan's Gutenberg Galaxy.
Oh yeah,
Did you read that?
I have read it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's mind
it
blowing.
really
It's
is. Yeah,
paradigm shifting.
it really is.
I haven't decided if I'm completely sold on his thesis, which is for another time.
Mhm.
But his little insights that he puts in along the way are more than worth it, whether his grand picture is correct or not. The Gutenberg Galaxy, strongly recommend to anyone who wants to read it. One of the things he says in the book, and he and others argue this elsewhere, it's just kind of a passing remark in the book, but it really struck me because I instantly equated this to the maximalist novel. And he talks about how different technologies kind of supplant each other, and that one technology will come into a society and it will be the defining piece of technology that just totally changes the society, totally reorients the society and the economy and the politics and just everything. It's a completely paradigm shifting technology that changes civilization as we know it, and certain epochs are even defined by the shift from one
Podcasting
technology to another.
This the
Well, the internet,
podcast
the
epoch.
internet is one
Sure.
of them. The
Yeah.
internet is one of these
Mhm.
technologies. The wheel, the printing press, and the internet are the three major ones, in my
Podcasts.
opinion.
Yeah,
100%.
totally.
Yeah.
100%. Mm-hmm.
But what he says is that when that happens, whatever it once it gets integrated, his argument is that once this technology is done disrupting civilization and gets integrated into the civilization, it kind of like melts back into the background. It becomes background radiation and is like woven into the fabric of the society, so that it's no longer like no one notices it. They just go about their lives. So once the wheel was done decimating every agricultural society on the planet through charioteering and chariot warfare, it then became the most banal thing in the
Yeah.
world. And
Yeah.
no one cared about the wheel. The horse is another one too. The horse did
Mhm.
this, millennia before the wheel, or
Sure.
maybe after the wheel. I don't remember.
I don't know
Anyway,
the timing, but yeah.
you get the point.
Mhm.
And this goes along, right? So one of the things McLuhan says is that once the obsolete technology is like in its death throes, it becomes conspicuous. So the point being is that that technology had been in the background and it had been woven into the society.
Mhm.
And then something else comes, upsets society, and by the time it's clear that society is now going to be oriented around this new thing and the old thing is going to be irrelevant, it becomes conspicuous. So one of the arguments for this is the massive pyramids built in Egypt. They came. I'm coming back to David Foster
No,
Wallace.
I
Don't
get
worry.
it. I'm following. This is great.
The massive pyramids that we know of didn't show up until the very end, like basically after the heyday of Egypt, and they came when an emperor was trying to be like, hey guys, like we're still here, we're still Egypt,
Right.
and they were trying to reassert themselves as like the greatest empire in the world. But it was basically done, so they had to build these like huge pyramids to like show off how great they were. That's what I think the maximalist novel is. I think that the genealogy of literature basically goes, and I was talking to Brad about this before we recorded, basically goes from the epic poem to the play to the novel, and now it's something on the internet. I don't know. It's probably just the internet.
Yeah,
We'll just say it's the
it's
internet now.
it's in flux.
It's
Right.
posting.
It's
Right.
posting. Is it?
It is
Yeah.
shit posting.
Memes?
Yeah.
Shit posting.
Yeah.
Actually, let's.
I'm not
I'll
even
finish,
joking. Yeah, go on, Astral.
I'll finish this thought, and then we should actually hash that out.
Yeah.
But whatever the thing is now, it's on the internet.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So the point being is that as the internet came in to like disrupt everything, and you saw it, we all watched this happen in real time. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm literally talking about the closing of Blockbuster Video. I'm talking about publishing houses closing. I'm talking about book sales plummeting.
Local
Record stores.
local newspapers, a little website with the best design. Any website, no website has a greater design.
Mhm.
Killed local newspapers. Craigslist.
Yeah.
Craigslist hasn't changed in 20 years.
It killed
That
the
thing
ads.
it killed local classifieds and killed
Right.
Which was their
tens
which was their budget.
that was
Yeah.
that was their whole budget. That had as much effect as anything else on the internet. That one dumb looking website, which works and hasn't changed in 20 years. Yeah, go on. I could talk about Craigslist
I wasn't
all
trying
day.
to interrupt you. I was trying to reinforce your insight by asking your younger listeners if they had any fucking idea
Right.
that when the boomers were in the middle-aged, how important to American civilization the classified ads were. I mean, dude,
That
right?
was, dude, the people, you would get jobs if you showed up to a new town. That's where you would look for work.
People lived and breathed the classifieds.
I
They were their
delivered
bread
these
and butter.
things. I delivered these papers. I started on a Wednesday. I've been in media my whole life, boys.
And, you
for
mentioned
real. I mean, yeah.
You mentioned the shit poster. You guys are from like hip Midwest towns. I don't know exactly where you're from. Oh, I got to look for saying that.
No, I'm from the Detroit area.
One of us is.
Okay. So my point is that when the internet came in to kill all this stuff, that's exactly when the maximalist novel showed up as a thing, as a characteristic genre. There are examples of maximalist novels that existed before, but they were singularities. There wasn't a shit ton of Moby Dicks that came out after Moby Dick. There was not a bunch of Gravity's Rainbows.
Right.
They were singularities.
Yeah, it's true. You can name the notable ones. It is a pretty short list, like pre 1995 or whatever. Yeah.
But in the book, The Maximalist Novel, because somebody coined that term, some Italian literary scholar, the books except for Gravity's Rainbow, which is really like the precursor, they're all from the 80s and 90s. They're all from the last gasp of that era. So that's the argument I'm making.
Would we put 2666 in this?
Yeah, we would.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
It's in the book.
Yeah.
It's in the book, The Maximalist Novel.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
And it's interesting because a lot of that it's technically pre-internet, but cable television exists, and cable television, in terms of, I think, the way you interact with it is like a low resolution version of the internet, right? You can kind of feel it coming through cable television.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Because Wallace never really went on the internet until fairly late in his life. Like when he wrote Infinite Jest, he apparently had spent almost no time on the internet.
It wasn't around.
It wasn't really a thing. I mean, you can go on like DARPANet or whatever. But and then he got there was a lot of sort of feedback or commentary about how he had replicated the experience of being on the internet with the book Infinite Jest. Reading it with the footnotes and everything was like being on the internet, according
That's
to
why this book is so important. You're exactly right. I mean, that's why it is the last great American novel. I mean, yes, you're 100% correct. The novel as a genre, at least the American novel, is dead. We have to just accept that. I stridently believe that. I will argue till I'm blue in the face about it. This was the last one. And the fact that the structure mimics the internet is not an accident, even though he didn't do it on purpose, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, he was seeing. I mean, that's what makes
he was trying to mimic television.
Yeah. That's what makes it visionary, though, because he saw with the logic of television. You just amp up the bandwidth enough on cable television, and you have the internet, basically.
1000% agree.
Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting.
I know it's your show and you were about to ask me something, but what do you guys, is it possible in the age of the internet to say that there is like a distinct medium of literary culture, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Now, it was epic poetry at one point, it was television at one point, it was film, where the sort of highest caliber literary output of a culture was going into one of these mediums. It was going into journalism at one point, it was going into the novel at another point, it was going into film. Where do you think it's going now? Kevin said shit posting, half tongue-in-cheek, half deadly serious. I think he's probably right. What do you guys think?
Are you asking? Are you asking? Is there a new artistic medium of expression, or are you asking where is the talent going? Because I don't think
both questions. Yeah, I'm asking both questions. Literary, though, specifically literary, not like visual, purely visual, not music, not audio.
Right.
Audio.
I think there are
both. I want both. Yeah.
There are threads and moments and accounts on Twitter that I think could merit like future recognition. It's hard to really grok because it feels so ephemeral.
Yeah, man.
And it's like it's like tears in the rain.
It really is. It's there and it's gone.
But one has to imagine what internet archaeology is going to look like, and probably already does look like. I don't know that that's going to be a new emerging practice over the next 40 or 50 years. How do you go back and reconstruct what was that damn thing called Live Journal?
Right.
You'll have these, and Brad, just let me finish this real quick. I have a Zoomer friend of mine who I use for like translating parts of the culture. She helps me understand certain things. And I know I help her. Well, but I mean, I'm pretty plugged in, that we call ourselves very online podcasters, although our age will, as we go, start to show more and more, totally, I'm sure. Totally. But she will get this look in her eyes, like Elmo, the Elmo GIF coming back from Vietnam, when I say the word Tumblr. Yeah. Like she will if you mention Tumblr, she'll go into a 30-minute rant about how she feels like she survived a psyop. People psyoped each other. It was this whole culture. And I'm like, well, how long did it go on? She's like, I don't know, 6 months.
Wow.
And she talks about how a lot of stuff in the culture right now, she's like, oh yeah, that was all on Tumblr, blah, blah, blah. And that's just gone. Poof. Kaiser Soze smoke.
Yeah.
Right. And I know I've had similar experiences in different corners of the internet. So it's a very, very tricky thing. There's something about the novel imprinted on paper. It's physical. It's there. You can wave it around and try to convert people, even with Infinite Jest. The internet is something else. It's very, very tricky. I don't know if I'm speaking to your question, but Brad, what did you have there?
Well, no, I mean, the things you're saying bring up a lot of things. I had a Tumblr for a long time, and it's funny because I hear about that now, and I realize the reason I wasn't affected by that is I didn't interact with anybody. I just posted stuff on there, and so like I didn't even realize there was a Tumblr subculture had a particular. For me, it was literally a blank. It was a format for putting things up.
There are people being psyoped right now. Lots of places, but like TikTok, you go over to TikTok, there's a whole world is happening right now. I really don't know, like in terms of like artistic expression, if there's something that will emerge that will replace those things that you mentioned out of the internet, or if it's just I don't know, Astral. What do you think? I mean, is there, I haven't seen that new thing where it's suddenly like, well, let's break it down into something really rudimentary, right? Have the legacy MFA programs, have the dusty old MFA programs opened up a fourth you got poetry, you got screenwriting, you got playwriting, you got prose. Have they opened up internet writing? Not really, but like,
no.
will that come? Like video game writing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Will that ever come? I mean, it feels, because novels when they came out were déclassé. It was sort of dirty and all that, very similar to video games. And video games for 20 years have made more money or 15 years have made more money than Hollywood. So
and now a novel is the average person's idea of high culture, right? Yes, the man on the street. What's the I
think I came around to my answer, Astral, and it's probably happening in gaming. Probably. Yeah.
That's a good answer. I want to say I think maybe gaming's heyday has passed. It's definitely where a lot of the talent was going for a time. I mean, a lot of the talent was getting eaten up by like HBO miniseries and Netflix miniseries and AMC miniseries. I guess they weren't miniseries. I guess they were full series.
Shows, yeah.
Boardwalk Empire and Deadwood and Rome. The writing there was just phenomenal. Sopranos. The writing on those shows was top notch, better than any movie at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Video gaming is tough. I'm not a huge gamer. I've only played a few, and I'm like peripherally aware of the content of certain games. But it's it's a funny medium though, because in McLuhan terms, it would be cold media, because hot media is like a novel where everything's given to you. You're given all the details of the world. You're given all the details of the inner monologue of the character, the interrelationships of the character. The resolution at the end is given to you. So in hot media, everything's given to you. Television is hot media. Cold media is where you have to fill it in yourself. So like talking on the phone, reading a newspaper is cold, because you have to like sort of like fill in the affect of the speaker.
Okay.
You can't see the person on the other end of the phone what their facial expressions are, so you have to fill it in like based on like the inflections in their voice.
So
video
Brad's
games
episodes are cold media. My episodes are hot.
Yeah, actually, that works. That works.
I'm just kidding.
Brad's the analytic philosopher. Kevin's the continental philosopher.
Yeah. All right. Oh man.
I've
never been called an analytic philosopher on my own show, nonetheless.
No, these are compliments. Oh, he took it as
what were you saying about all
so
of
I'm
Art
saying
of
video
Darkness
games.
is hot
The problem with video games is it's very cold. It's a very cold medium. So the only two games I've played in my adult life, well, since I was 20 years old, I played the first PlayStation. I played a bunch of games on that: Metal Gear, Final Fantasy, Grand Theft Auto 3, other games. So I was like 20. Then I stopped playing games until I was like 40, and I played Breath of the Wild and I played Elden Ring. Shout out, shameless self-promotion. Astral Flight Simulation has like a 4-hour episode on Elden Ring recorded that'll be released. Yeah. And those games are, in my opinion, the height of that genre, based on what I know about the genre, because there's very little given to you on the story. There's like moments where you meet characters and they tell you something about what's happening in the world, or there's an inscription on something that you read, and if you don't read it, you can't advance. There's these little snippets, and then the rest of the story is made up by you playing the game. So you're like filling in the story. So Kevin is correct, but in that he's correct in that that's the medium that storytelling has shifted to in its like totality in our culture, whereas film has just degenerated and novels have degenerated and television has degenerated. But I worry that just like television being like the place where all the talented writing was going was just a fast flame that burned out. It was what, The Sopranos, maybe you could start 1999, because it went from the schlocky sitcom that was the same thing over and over again, which is exactly what Infinite Jest is trying to do, by the way. we can get back to the book in a minute.
Yeah.
So The Sopranos was telling this long story over a long period of time. And then it died. And like, I don't know what's a really high quality series with really impeccable writing that came out after like 2010. I mean, seriously.
I mean, you got the first season of True Detective. I mean,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's
Good
been
answer.
a while. Yeah,
Good
I mean,
answer.
you got
But was
I
that the
mean,
swan song though?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really
I mean,
watch
you
enough
got
to say. Like,
I don't think it's
Breaking Bad was pretty
that was
swell.
yeah, but that
Yeah,
was like
but
2008 though. That was 2008,
yeah,
9, 10.
yeah,
it's
yeah.
true. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
True, and then
there.
True Detective went the same way. The True Detective season 1 is fucking phenomenal. True Detective
Yep.
season 2 is very solidly almost just as good.
Mhm.
Season 3 is unwatchable.
I haven't seen
Game
it.
of Thrones was outstanding until the very end, and they couldn't bring it home.
Mm.
And it's just like that happens over and over and over again. And I think that it just burned out. And I'm making a point. I mean, I feel like
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I'm so
No, you're
far
all
off.
right, man.
No,
This is
no,
good.
not at
This is
all,
good
not at
stuff.
all.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make though is that the internet, this is what the internet does. It makes these things ephemeral. It ephemerizes literature. It ephemeralizes the literary arts. Because the whole reason why it does that is because what you get on the internet is a snippet. It's a quick, rapid, prepackaged dopamine hit that's delivered to you rapid fire, and it's over. It's the next thing.
Yeah.
So to really sit down and take a story meticulously and write it out to its fullest possible degree. And a great example is the Game of Thrones series. I mean, that's a maximalist story. Those novels are maximalist, right? But all this stuff is coming in the wake of David Foster Wallace. This is why he's so important. He is the cornerstone. He's the turning point. He brought his novel to completion like you would a woman, which he it was wont to do, as we all know, and you guys talked about in your episode.
Yeah.
He did bring that novel full circle. I mean, he just did.
I've got it open
Whether
in
you-
front of me, and it's just
Infinite Jest.
And just the shape of it and the size of the paragraphs and reading bits and bobs of it. Yeah, but he doesn't make an effort to make it easy for you, does he?
No. Well,
Yeah.
but this is part of the thing too. I mean, this is another part of his sort of thesis or project. He wanted it to be hard to read. I mean, he was trying to redeem the human ability to carry out a difficult cognitive task. I mean, that was part of what he was concerned with, was that we were basically losing the ability to do that. And maybe that's pretentious, but I don't think he was wrong in saying that
him and Jonathan Franzen were explicitly trying to do exactly what you just said. Have you read Franzen's "Perchance to Dream" essay?
Yes, it's been a minute, but yes, yeah.
You're the first person I've ever asked that who's read
it. Yeah,
Franzen
is an interesting.
Probably the only person who's met Franzen.
No, have you?
Yeah, back in the MFA days. Franzen is an interesting figure because he is. God, he's an incredibly talented guy, but it feels like he let himself be so shaped by sociocultural forces that he kind of ran out of stuff to say. It's just sort of like, as talented as David Foster Wallace or maybe anybody else, but it's like he allowed himself to be poured into a specifically shaped container. That's how I see it.
Is the malady of the day. That is that's happening to everyone. That's why David Foster Wallace killed himself. What you just said is the symptom of our entire culture, because the Game of Thrones books, the Song of Ice and Fire books, they're amazing. The first 3 books are amazing, right? They are maximalist because he's trying to do exactly what I said about Dublin and Boston, and he's trying to do it with Westeros, of this imaginary fantasy kingdom, and he was unable to bring it to completion. Why? 2 reasons. The first is that he tried to do too much.
Yeah.
But the second, probably more important reason, is because the show superseded his
Right.
work, and it became so insanely popular, and he made so much money, and he became so famous that the actual content of the I was going to say the media.
Yeah.
I'm so McLuhan.
Yeah.
The actual content of the piece of art became less important than like the image and
Mhm.
the culture built up around it.
Mhm.
And of course, that culture was partially generated by the internet. I mean, I was
Mhm.
on message boards about A Song of Ice and Fire when the internet was so young that it was literally it was like Oregon Trail level graphics. It was like
Right.
literally a purple background
I love
with
that
like
stuff.
gold letters and like
Uh,
8-bit like swords
I
and
want to go
shields and emojis.
back. I want to go back so bad, guys.
Yeah, and
Man, that whole process was interesting because you're right about it being part of the internet, because it wasn't just the success of it. It wasn't just the money, though those are huge factors. It
right.
was also this interactive process where basically
Exactly.
the fans were yelling
Exactly.
at him. Yeah. And I
And he was
remember
hanging
being
out with his fans like
right.
crazy.
Yeah. I remember being very upset at the fact that people were telling him he needed to hurry up. Because as a writer, I was like, he doesn't owe you anything. George R.R. Martin doesn't owe anybody anything. He
Well,
wrote these massive books.
as
Like,
someone whose life was given meaning by his books,
mhm.
I felt like he
he felt
did owe it to
he felt he owed you one, at least
me.
one last. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, man. So, I mean, Wallace needs to be given an extreme amount of credit for having this massive vision
Mhm.
that he saw through to completion. And I understand why people don't like this book, but
Mhm.
he did succeed at what he was trying to do, because
Interesting.
you brought up in your episode that blog post. I've read that blog post that
Aaron
explains what
Schwartz. Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
This is what I was talking about, where I said like the whole postmodern thing where you have to have all this extraneous information. Like the contents of the book aren't enough for you to know what happened. You
Right.
have to like do work. You have to take notes and you have to figure it out, and you have to take this puzzle piece and put it together. I go into this in excruciating detail in the Last Things episode on
Mhm.
YouTube. I feel guilty about it because Dan and Last Things would just sat there and listen to me talk for like a half an
It
hour.
was great.
Thank you. But I'm still to this day, I'm like so embarrassed that I did that.
No, it was
But
good.
I explained how like Mulholland Drive, Pulp Fiction, but really Pulp Fiction is a little different. But Mulholland Drive and Infinite Jest are completely incoherent if you don't take the puzzle and piece it together and understand that when you do that, there are going to be missing pieces, and you have to figure out what the missing pieces are. And it's they did it on purpose. I'm telling you that they did it on
Yeah,
purpose.
I believe that. Well,
And I don't
that's
mean you. I'm talking about like, because whenever I talk
anybody.
about novels and I say like this is what this novel's about, and people are like, well, that's not what the author intended, and I'm like, fair enough, but this
Yeah.
is in this case what I just said about David Lynch, David Foster Wallace, it is what they intended, and I know for a
Right.
fact it is because they say it in interviews.
No, I think you're totally right there. Also, I mean, the intentional fallacy, authors only sort of know what they're doing anyway. So, yeah.
So
I think this is probably. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Well, I was
I
gonna
could
say,
talk for
yeah, no,
4
I was
fucking
gonna say. I mean,
hours.
I think this is a good note to sort of maybe close down the free portion of Art of Darkness. On this note that Infinite Jest succeeded in David Foster Wallace's project. I think we've made a very strong case for that.
It sold over 1 million copies.
Boom.
So by any objective American standard, that is a wild runaway success.
That is a great American novel. If it sells
moved a lot of paper. And what do we have on the After Dark for Patreon, Brad? Patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod. I know I'm prepping Lenny Riefenstahl. That's coming up, coming in hot. Lenny, going to be very interesting.
Intense.
Can
very
I jump
dark.
in real quick?
Yeah.
I just read like last week Susan Sontag's essay about Leni Riefenstahl. I
Ooh.
forgot the name of it, but it's the essay that has the art of fascism, or the fascist aesthetic.
No.
Whatever that essay is, I just read that,
Mhm.
and the whole thing is about Leni Riefenstahl.
Leni
Interesting.
Riefenstahl has influenced filmmakers and people ever since. She created, she didn't just do Triumph of the Will. She made a very, very famous film about I think it was the 36 Berlin Olympics. That was definitive, and she was a pioneer. Little problematic. She worked for the Austrian corporal. Going to be a good one. Right. Yeah.
That'll be interesting.
And you're prepping Tarkovsky, Brad. So you're going over this. I'm going to the Third Reich. We're going to be on
opposite. We're going to be on opposite sides for sure.
Great. You're going to the cold medium. I'm going to the hot medium. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It all comes together. So you're prepping Tarkovsky.
Sense.
This is a long way of saying support the pod. We put in the work. Brad and I are always working. We're always getting new books. We're always thinking about new subjects. Patreon.com/artofdarkpod. What are we going to talk about on the After Dark, Brad?
I mean, I had a few things floating around. I think we're going to talk a little bit about the Pale King. Astral, I don't think you've actually read that, and that's fine. There's a couple things I want to say about it, but I do also want to talk about something we didn't get to, which was David Foster Wallace's massive essay, E Unibus Plurum, which is kind of a work of genius, and I think it's worth talking about. We touched on it on the core episode. It's big. It has a lot to say, and I think it'll be good for us too. I've got some snippets to read, and I know Astral, you're familiar with it.
I spent a number of years considering that the greatest single piece of writing I'd ever read.
Oh, excellent! We're gonna learn more about that. Awesome.
All right.
Awesome.
On the After Dark. Take a few minutes, boys. Quickly rush to the Bird website and shit post for posterity.
Right.
The only thing
for the culture.
For the culture. Thanks again. Thanks, Astral.